Prompt evaluation. Essentially, there are two elements to prompt evaluation. One is the prompt itself, and the other is the model's response to the prompt. When we evaluate prompts, we're looking at two factors. One is writing a good prompt, and the second is how does the model respond to the prompt. If we look at the first one, essentially there are two elements that are very important in writing a good prompt. The first is to make constraint. If you don't constrain the model's response in your prompt, then you may find it very difficult to get the response that you're looking for. A classic example is be precise. Some models particularly can be very verbose. Um, for instance, if I'm looking for information about how to about my travel plans when I go abroad, and I'm asking to map me out public transport. Now, if I say, please do this with each uh, travel plan in a bullet point, only giving the day, the name of the company, the type of transport, uh, etc., etc. What you want to do is to constrain it. What you don't want to do is to justify your constraints. Justifying a constraint will be saying, be precise because I'm in a hurry. The model doesn't need to know that you're in a hurry. It doesn't help its response in any way to know that you're in a hurry. And in fact, it's just extra information that will, I wouldn't say necessarily confuse the model. The model may well be able to cope with it, but it's unnecessary. And what we want is very precise prompts that give a specific ask to the model so that the model can give a good response. The other thing in terms of writing a good prompt is backstory. Backstories can be very important when they're relevant to the ask. So, for instance, if I'm asking, how do I make my newborn son abroad a British citizen? Now, if I use the backstory, I was born in Britain, that's great because that gives the model information that is highly relevant to the ask. But if I say I was born and raised in Britain, the second factor that I was raised in Britain has no relevance at all to the ask, and therefore we should avoid it. We should only include a backstory that is necessary to the question. Now, obviously, if I'm asking, is my son British? Now, I'm asking because I don't know the answer. I may think that telling the model everything that I know, that I can think of, could be relevant. So I might think that me being raised in Britain is relevant. But as the prompt writers, we need to keep in mind to have a backstory that we only including the backstory that we believe is necessary. There's no question sometimes we don't provide enough information. I've had numerous occasions where I ask a question and the model is struggling. And then when I give more information, another specific bit of information, the model says, that really helps, and then answers the question and gives me an answer that I feel is satisfactory. Now, in terms of the response, there are two elements that we should fundamentally assess when we're dealing with the response to a prompt. And these elements are truthfulness and information following. The truthfulness is quite simply, is the model telling the truth? If we were to try to verify that answer using other sources, would those other sources confirm that the prompt was telling the truth. We know that prompts don't always tell the truth. Um, Not deliberately, but because for whatever reason they're certainly not perfect yet. So this element of truthfulness is very important. A good response will be a truthful response, as far as the model is aware. The other element in evaluating the responses is it it is the model answering the ask. So is it following the request, whatever that request may be? So if in my travel plans I ask for it in an Excel style, so that I can then copy and paste it into my Excel file, so that I then have these plans in an Excel file ready to use. Um, does it follow the instructions or not, or does it ignore the instructions? And I think this is clearly very important. So basically, there are two elements to whether the response is good, which are truthfulness and has it followed the ask. But basically, in terms of assessing good responses, we can write rubrics. And what a rubric does is basically, if you're going to write a rubric for the ideal, a rubric is an ideal response to an ask. And if you're going to write a rubric, obviously you need to know the answer to the question. So, for instance, my question is: my son born British? Is my son British because he was born in abroad? The answer I know is yes, because I was born in Britain to British parents. So the answer to that question is yes. So when we're looking for the perfect response, the ideal response, we need to know the answer and we need to be able to write rubrics. So, for instance, a rubric for that question is um, your son is a British citizen already. Um, and that's based on the information prompt that I was born in the UK to British parents, and therefore I can pass on my British citizenship to my child, even though my child is abroad. Um, an ideal response would also say the way to prove this is applying for a passport, which you can do abroad, but you would actually write two rubrics for that. You would write one is your son can apply for a UK passport, and the second, he can apply for a UK, or you can apply for a UK passport in his name while abroad. And again, looking, if I say at the backstory, I'm married to the mother who is a foreigner, because the fact of being married is itself very important information in order to be able to answer this particular question. Um, and so that would be mentioned in the rubric that an ideal response would include the fact that being married to the mother enables the application to take place. Being married to the mother also means that the father can apply, because otherwise the mother would have to apply herself. So basically, with rubrics, we're looking for the ideal response. I hope this has been helpful.